So I'm going to go ahead and get started already. So I muted everybody for right now, so that way we can keep all the questions to the end. And then if you guys still have questions at the very end, then we can go over all of those things. So today's session, we're going to cover assignment 4 and assignment 5. So this one, I'm going to try to condense all of the information into 30 minutes. We might go over like 2-3 minutes or something like that if there's questions at the end. But let me start off with assignment number 4. So both of these assignments are only 2 pages. So this should be a little bit easier than the usual for you guys, because this is something that we would probably do in one day in class. So these 2 assignments are only 2 pages each. It's still covering the same thing that we were covering on assignment number 3, which is like adding, subtracting integers, a little bit of fractions that are in there. It's kind of the same thing. So for assignment number 4, the very first page should say subtracting rational numbers. So if you guys have that printed out or saved on your desktop, that should be the title on it, subtracting rational numbers. So on this one, the very first thing that it says at the top, it says to jot down the process for subtracting fractions and decimals. So I'm going to give you guys that answer so that way you guys can write it down right now. So if you don't have a pen or a pencil, you should get those so that way you can write this down. So, and again, remember, I'm going to be recording these and posting them on that YouTube channel and sending out the link to all of your parents. So that way it kind of helps for you guys later on. So I'm going to bring this a little bit closer because somebody said that they couldn't really hear. So on question number 1, so technically question number 1 is to jot down the process for subtracting fractions and decimals. So for that question, the first part should be about fractions. So you're going to write down fractions, and then you're going to put, after fractions, you're going to put find the least common denominator, and then a comma, and then you add the numerator, and then comma, and then you keep the denominator the same. So remember, denominators and numerators, it's just like if you have 1/2, the top part is the numerator, right? And then the bottom part is going to be the denominator. Okay? So top part is always the numerator, bottom part is the denominator. So anytime that you guys need to add or subtract and the denominator is the same, so like if you're doing 1/2 plus 2/2, the denominator always stays the same. So whenever you guys have something like that, the denominator, when you add these up, the denominator should be a 2. I already know that. And then all you're really doing is adding the top ones. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So then that's it. It might seem complicated because it's a fraction, especially like if, let's say there was a 1 1½ plus 1/2. So first, what you would do in something like this is you would forget about that 1 in the front, and then you focus on these first. So the denominator would be 2, and then the top part would be a 2, and then all you do is you add that 1 in at the very end. So this would technically be the answer. And then 2/2, of course, that is the same thing as 1, right? So then this one is basically 1 plus 1, which is 2. So that answer right there, 1½ plus another half is going to be 2. So for the fractions, that's what you would write down. Decimals, you're going to basically just line up the decimals and add or subtract. So when you're doing decimals, it's even easier. So it's like, let's say it's 1.5 plus 1.5. If you have something like that, then all this part is you're just adding those up, right? So this would be a 10, and then that would be a 3. So that would be 3.0. So when you're adding or subtracting decimals, it's even easier. So the answer there for the decimals would be line up the decimals like this. So you line up the decimals and then you add or subtract. And that's it. And then, so the next part right below that. So, and this is still on assignment number 4. So right below that, you have when subtracting, we will use additive and inverse to add the opposite. Then follow the rules for adding integers. That part, I'm gonna explain it a little bit more right now. It'll make more sense once we actually do the actual problems. But right below that, it says rewrite the problem to add the opposite, then follow the rules for adding integers. So that would be it. So for that part right there, there's a bunch of math problems now, right? So let's actually get into the actual math problems. So the first part that you guys have right there is you have this. So okay, so the first question that you have right there is going to be 7 minus 16. So 7 minus 16, right? So this is super easy. This is the same stuff that we've been covering on the assignment number 3. Basically, it's the same stuff. So 7 minus 16 would be what? All you do is, this is 7 positive numbers, and then this right here is 16 negative numbers. So first of all, who's going to win? If 7 people go up against 16, who's going to win? Well, it's going to be 16, right? So all you're really doing is you're subtracting 7 from 16, because it's like this, right? So if you have 7 positive ones, and then you have 16 negative, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then all of these were negative. If you need to do it like this, then you can do it like that. So all you would do in this case is you just, these cancel each other out, right? 1 cancels 1 out, 1 cancels 1 out, 1 cancels 1 out, right? And then all you do is you count up what you have left right here. So in this case, it would be negative 9, right? So negative 9 would be the answer for that. So for the next ones, like if you had something like negative 8 minus 11, in this case, they're both the same symbol, right? So it's 8 negative ones and then 11 negative ones. So all you're doing in this case is you're just adding. So 8 plus 11 would just be negative 19 in that case. And then I'll let you guys do the rest of those problems on there. And just to remind you guys, so I just uploaded the quiz for this assignment. So if you don't want to actually print it out and write the answers down and work it out on paper, then you can do the quizzes app. And yeah, so somebody asked if we get credit for this. So yeah, I mean, this is all going to be for a grade. So these are the only grades that you guys are going to be receiving for right now. So it's really important that you keep up with every single one of these assignments, because if not, you're going to be getting zeros for these, and it's going to bring your average way down. So I'll let you guys do the rest on those. Let me jump down to the second box down there. So now it's just adding and subtracting decimals. So it's the same exact thing with whole numbers, but with decimals. So in this case, it would be, so for the decimals, you would have like 4.5. And then, what is it? Minus 6.3. Right? So if you do it, like if you write it down the way that it's written right there, it'll be easy to understand. So 4.5 minus 6.3. So first of all, which number is bigger, the positive or the negative? It's going to be the negative, right? So, and the negative ones, if that one is a larger number than the positive ones, then you already know that the answer is going to be negative, right? So if you have a bigger number on this side, then you already know, well, my answer is going to be negative for sure. And then all you're really doing in this case is you're just subtracting 4.5 from 6.3. That's kind of what you're doing. So the answer for this one would end up being negative 1.8 for that one. And it's just your normal subtraction or addition. So there's nothing fancy. There's no special rules or formulas. The main thing that you got to know is that it's either going to be a positive or a negative number, and that's it. Right? So, and then I'll let you guys do the rest. There is one part. So in that little same box that we're on with the decimals, towards the end, then you start to get numbers that are like this. So these are the questions towards the end. So towards the end, you start to get questions like this. So negative 4.7 minus negative 3.6. So in this case, it's a little bit different. So whenever you have a minus and a minus that are both together, this part right here, this ends up turning into a positive. So what that means is negative 4.7 plus 3.6. So I already know for sure that this case right here, this first part right there is going to be the bigger number, right? So negative 4.7 and a positive 3.6. I already know that this answer is going to be a negative. But this is the part that you have to understand right here. So whenever you have a minus and then a negative right next to each other, then that turns it into a positive. So minus negative, it turns into a positive. And so in this case, that one would end up being a negative 1.1. And that's the very last answer on the subtracting decimals section. Okay. So then now let me go to the second page on assignment number 4. So on the second page, the very top part says the blank for fractions is the same. It just requires more steps. So the process for fractions is the same. It just requires more steps. So for the only difference from whole numbers and the decimals, and then when you have the actual fractions, is you just have to make sure that the denominator is the same. So remember, numerator is on top, and then the denominator is on the bottom. Okay, so that is what you have to make sure. Okay, so numerator and denominator, right? And so somebody's asking that, why don't I give you guys the work so that way you can print it out? So the assignments are on the actual Google Classroom. So all you have to do is you double click on the actual assignments and then you can print them out. The important thing on these Zoom meetings is that you just pay attention, because we're covering the stuff that is going to be on the actual assignment. So you're not going to know what to do unless you're paying attention on the Zoom meetings. So on, okay, so the very first question. So the answer is going to be process on that first blank. And then the second sentence, it says, rewrite the problem to add the opposite, then you follow the rules for adding. So you could change it up. Honestly, I think that's more complicated. Me personally, I like this instead. So I personally prefer to just keep it the same. So 3 over 5 minus 4 over 5. So this looks a little bit more confusing because now you have actual fractions in here. So when you have actual fractions in here, yes, it looks like it's going to be a more difficult problem, but it's the same exact thing. So which one is bigger, this positive number or this negative number? So it's gonna, in this case, it's gonna be the negative number because it's 3 over 5 and 4 over 5. So the 4 is larger than the 3, right? So this number is larger than this one. So in this case, I already know that the answer is gonna be a negative. So if the answer is a negative, then at least you can eliminate some of the answer choices. So like if you're taking the quizzes, the quiz on quizzes, or if you're doing it on paper, you already know for sure that the answer is going to be a negative at that point. And then all you're really doing is 3 minus 4. So 3 minus 4, so if you do it like that, 3 minus 4 is going to be a negative 1, right? So, and then the denominator is always going to stay the same. Whether when you're adding or subtracting, denominator stays the same. So in this case, it's going to be a negative number, so negative 1. And then denominator is always going to be the same, but it's a negative 1 over 5. Because remember, from 3 and 4, when you subtract 3 minus 4, it's going to be a negative 1. So it's going to be negative 1 over 5. That's it. So besides that, let's see. Let me go to the next part. And in that same square, towards the end, they do the same thing again. So in that same square, and I am giving you some of the answers on here, so that way when you take the quiz or do the assignment on your own, these are some of the answers that I'm giving to you guys. So that last question, so it's negative 8 over 9. And then minus, and then in parentheses, you have a negative 4 over 9. So because this minus and the negative are together, this is going to turn into a plus. So now the question is just negative 8 over 9 plus 4 over 9. So in this case, which is a bigger number, 8 over 9 or 4 over 9? It's going to be the 8 over 9, right? Because 8 is larger than 4. So I already know the answer is going to be a negative. And then what happens when you have a negative 8 and then you have 4 positive? So those 4 positive are going to cancel out 4 of the negative, and then all you're going to be left with is 4 over 9. So that would be the answer for that. So negative 4 over 9. So that last question at the very end is negative 4 over 9. Okay. Then right beneath that, it's they're still doing the same exact thing. So they have like a negative 1 over 6 minus 2 over 3, except this time the only difference is that, and these are probably like the most complicated questions out of all of them. So when you have these negative 1 over 6 and minus 2 over 3, so first what you have to do is you notice that the denominators aren't the same in this one, right? So we need to make those denominators the same. So in this case, 3, I can turn a 3 into a 6. So all I would have to do is multiply this times 2. So first I got to do that. So then you have 4 over 6. So now the question is actually that. So now once you have the denominators the same, then you can either add or subtract. So on this one right here, so negative 1 over 6 minus 4 over 6. So if you have a negative 1 and then you subtract 4, so all you're going to do is you're basically adding them up, right? Because this is the same sign. So all you're doing is that's going to be a negative 5 over 6. And so the denominator is always the same on these. And then you guys can do the rest from there. So now let me go to assignment number 5. So on assignment number 5, I'm going to help you guys out quite a bit because this one involves more word problems. So all we're really trying to get you guys to do is to understand if you're doing word problems, what words mean what, if they're talking about giving somebody a credit, you need to know, okay, well, that's adding. Or if they're talking about decreasing or there's a loss, you need to understand, okay, well, that's subtracting something. So that's kind of like the main idea from the assignment number 5 is to understand those keywords. So I'm going to go through the very first part. It's like a huge box. So I'm going to go through all the answers right now. So I'm going to give you guys a lot of answers. So, and yes, I'm going to make quizzes for assignment number 5. I'm going to do that right after this Zoom meeting. So that way, while you guys are doing assignment number 4, I'll be working on the quizzes for 5, and then it should be up by the time you guys are done. So on assignment number 5, so the very first part is it says, we see blank numbers frequently in real life. So rational numbers. So we see rational numbers frequently in real life. So whenever you go to the store and there's a discount on something, or let's say if somebody that owns their own business and they get a profit at the end of the year, or if somebody is let's say that they give you an allowance, things like that. So there's going to be a lot of positive and negative rational numbers in real life. So the answer to that is rational. So on that first part, so the first part says positive, right? So on that first part that says positive, certain positive words that you can have or you can see in real life are going to be credit. So credit is one of them. So write that down. If you receive something, so receive is a positive thing in real life. A deposit. So if you deposit something, that's also another word for positive. Revenue. Revenue is another keyword that means positive. Income or a salary. So income or salary, that also the same thing. That means positive rational number. So either income or salary. Profit. So like we were talking about just right now, if somebody owns their own business and at the end of the year they have a profit, so that means it's positive. It's a positive number. Increase. So if somebody increases something, that's the same thing. That means plus, positive. Or gaining. So gaining anything, then that means also positive. So those are all the keywords for positive. So again, it's going to be credit, receives, deposit, revenue, income, salary, profit, increase, or gain. So all of those. And then negative. So negative numbers. So when you're talking about negative words in real life, so things like that are going to be owe. When you owe somebody something, like if you owe your friend money, then that's negative. Debt. So if you have debt, like credit card debt, that's the same thing. It's a negative number. A decrease in something, that's also negative. Deficit, that also means negative. Loss. So whenever a company has a loss at the end of the year, like if somebody that owns their own business, if you have a loss at the end of the year, then that means negative also. Loan. So if you borrow something, a loan, usually that's also negative. Deducts. So anytime they deduct anything, like if they deduct some money from your allowance or deduct money from a check, things like that, that's a negative. And then under. So whenever they use the word under, typically they're talking about negative. So words for negative again are going to be owe, debt, decrease, deficit, loss, a loan, deducts, or under. So those are all the words, or basically the answers for the whole first part of that for assignment number 5. So I hope you guys got those. So the next part right there, there's a sentence and it says, think through the blank, then follow the rules for subtracting blank, draw a number line or blank to help. So when you're thinking through the situation, so that's going to be the word for that. Because when you're looking at any kind of problem, a situation, you have to think through the situation. You have to actually reread the words, make sure you're reading it carefully, right? Then you follow the rules for adding and subtracting rationals. So that's the second blank. The answer is going to be rationals. And then you draw a number line or a model to help you. So sometimes if you need to draw some kind of model, then you got to draw it. Just like how we were doing it with the positive and negative, the circles, a positive and a negative. If you need to do things like that to help you out, so that way you can understand the situation, then do it. It's better than not doing it. So then at the bottom, it says, I know, or actually there's actual problem there. So it says, number one, so during a drought, the local lake was 2 1/4 feet below normal levels. And then 2 weeks later, the water level had dropped an additional 1 3/8 feet. And then what was the change in the water level during the drought? So for that one, you need to understand, okay, so if there's a drought and the lake fell 2 1/4 feet below normal levels, then that's the same thing as subtract, right? So whenever you're subtracting something, so it dropped 2 1/4 feet, and then it dropped again 1 3/8 feet. So I need to know, how far did the water level change? So basically, when you write something like that down, so it dropped -2 1/4, and then it dropped again some more, -1 3/8. So that's the number that, or the question. And then so you gotta answer that. So in the solution, you have to write down what the solution is to that. And remember, when the denominators aren't the same, you have to make it the same. So whatever you have to do to this 4 to turn it into an 8, then you have to multiply by that. And then on the second page, so the second page, same thing. You have to read that question, and then you have to write down what you know, and then what you need to know. And then have to actually, on where it says plan to work, you actually have to show your work there. So where it says plan to work, you show your work for that problem number 2. And then your solution, so you owe some amount of money, or you're getting a certain amount of money. And then on the bottom part, same thing again. So for question number 3, it's another word problem, and then you have to figure out what's going on there. So if you have a balance, how much the balance is, how much you paid, or what you have left to owe, and then everything that you need to know, and then you actually work out the problems at the very end. So once you work out the problems at the end, then you show your solution. So for these, you actually have to show your work. All right, so I'm gonna open it up for, so if anybody does have a question, so you can unmute and you can ask a question if you need to.
Hello.
I have a question. I have a question about the fractions, about like the negatives and like the positives. Like, how do you do that with the fraction?
Okay, so so the question is, if you have a negative and a positive on fractions, right? So just like how you do it with positive numbers, so let's say you have 1/4, and then let's say it's a -1/4, and then you're also adding another -1/4. If you're doing something like that, right? So in this case, so this is a negative number, just like how we do it with the positive numbers. Like, let's say you have a -1 plus another -1. These two people are on the same side, right? Because it's a -1 and a -1. So then that would be a -2. On this case, it's the same thing. It's just that there's a number on the bottom. The denominator, you always keep it the same. So I know for this, whatever my answer is, 4 is going to be at the bottom. And then all you have to worry about is the numerator, the one on the top. So you're only having to worry about this and this. So this is a -1 because there's a negative here. So that's a -1 plus another -1. So the same thing as this. -1 plus a -1 is a -2. So it's going to be a 2 at the top, and this is a negative. And then that's all. You leave the denominator the same, so it's going to be -2/4. So that's how you do it for, I guess, fractions that have negative and positive. Okay, so any other questions about assignment number 4 or 5? That what?
Do we get credit for being here?
Sir.
Like
No.
on the
Probably
meetings?
not.
So the main reason that you have to attend these sessions is because you're not going to know how to do these problems if you don't attend these sessions. So you need to attend these sessions. If you do it on your own, that's fine. But more than likely, you're going to have a very difficult time on answering all these questions.
Mister,
Yeah.
I really don't know what to do.
I couldn't tell. Some of them were hard because some of them it looked like a minus symbol and
Are
some of
you
them looked like
blind?
negative.
Yes.
But I'm covering you guys.
Echo.
So you guys should have this downloaded on your computer, or you should already have it printed out. But I'm covering assignments number 4 and number 5. I'm doing the same exact stuff that you guys are that you guys should have right in front of you. So the stuff that I'm writing down, you guys should have it right in front of you. So you should know whether I'm doing it's a positive or a negative. And also, so that's the other reason that I'm recording these. So that way, just in case you need to go back and you need to look at it, I'm going to send out the YouTube link so that way your parents have it. Okay, so any other questions?
Me.
Okay.
I barely got the papers printed out.
What are the?
Okay.
Hey, Mr. G.
Yeah.
What do you say?
What's the point
what's
of this?
supposed to be printed out?
Assignment number 4 and assignment number 5. You don't have to have it printed out. You can have it saved on your computer or your phone, and that's it. I mean, that's what you should.
2 more quizzes.
Or what?
Okay, so
Like,
For the assignments, do more quizzes. I don't want to do work.
yeah, if you guys prefer to do the quizzes and you do the quizzes, then if you do that, then you don't have to print anything out. You don't have to write anything down. You don't have to email anything.
Doing them.
It's either
so we only
quizzes app.
we only had to
Yes.
we only had to print out 4 and 5.
Well, assignment number 3, but we already covered that on Wednesday.
Hey,
For this
I
week,
had it on you.
so for this week, I gave out assignment number 3, 4, and 5. So you guys should do 3, 4, and 5, and I think I put the due dates. I think Saturday.
Tomorrow.
How much more time left, bro? I'm trying to play some 2K,
No,
bro.
that's it. So if you don't have any more questions, then that's it.
No more questions. So we can leave
Mr.
right
G.
Yeah.
Mr. G.
now? I'm playing GTA.
Goodbye.
I'm going to go play Minecraft.
All right. Bye, guys.
Here.
Bye.
Here.